Chapter 466. A gracious invitation. Sunny spent a very pleasant morning selling all the stuff he had brought to the dream realm to a crowd of awakened, each of them ravenous for the small comforts the real world could provide. Very few had a close enough relationship with a master or a saint to be able to get these things here, in a place as remote as the Chained Isles. Things were slightly different in large citadels like Bastion or Ravenheart, but on the frontier, most people simply had to figure out ways to get by with makeshift replacements. Still, nothing could compare to the real deal. All in all, the brilliant Emporium was performing splendidly. Of course, Sunny did not charge too much for the small necessities he sold, but it added up. He wouldn't charge a whole soul shard, even if it was from a dormant creature, for a tube of toothpaste. But a few tubes, plus a toothbrush, plus some soap and a box of tea leaves, and a promise to bring some sugar with him the next time? That could work. Unlike before, he wanted soul shards instead of memories. He was going to take these shards to the waking world, where their value was much higher. Out there, soul shards came from only two sources. Some were brought back by Ascended and Transcendent from their journeys into the dream realm, and some were scavenged from the corpses of the nightmare creatures that had invaded reality through a gate. They were always in short supply, because anyone in possession of a shard was more likely to use it themselves than to sell it for credits. Saturating their soul core meant much more to an awakened than worldly currency. After all, dead men could not spend their riches. The demand, on the other hand, was extremely high. Not only because all awakened strived to become stronger, but also because young sleepers, especially, were able to use these shards to increase their chances of returning from their first venture into the dream realm alive. That was the reason why even Castor, a scion of a prestigious legacy clan, had not entered the Forgotten Shore with his core already fully saturated. And that was the reason why Sunny was going to profit a lot from being in possession of his new favorite memory, the magnificent covetous coffer. After all, he, for better or worse, had no use for the soul shards whatsoever. He could not consume them, so there was no choice to be made between growing stronger himself or earning credits from others. He was going to sell the shards, buy memories, and feed them to Saint. This simple system was almost unfairly lucrative for Sunny, because memories, unlike shards, had no additional value in the real world. Every sleeper and every awakened could bring back memories from the dream realm and freely exchange them there, which did not mean that memories were cheap. In fact, they were extremely expensive. But the correlation between the number of soul shards he would have to sell and the number of memories he would be able to buy was very much in his favor. And of course, Sunny also didn't even need good memories. The worse, the better. The usefulness of a memory dictated its price, but did not affect the amount of shadow fragments Saint received from consuming them at all. His smile was growing wider and wider. 2 months, 3 max. That's how long it's going to take me to bring Saint to 200/200. And what happens next? Oh my, I can hardly wait to find out. His pleasant thoughts, however, were eventually interrupted by a shadow falling over him. Another customer? Sunny looked up and tensed a little, recognizing the person in front of him. It was a young woman wearing a simple white garment, the same one that had escorted him to meet Master Roan before his journey to the shipwreck island, the representative of the White Feather clan. He suppressed a heavy sigh. What can I do for you? The young woman bowed slightly, then said in a neutral tone, Saint Tyrus invites you to share a meal with her, awakened sunless. Curses. That is what I have been afraid of. Sunny shivered slightly. What were the chances of him keeping all his secrets to himself during a conversation with the fearsome demigod in charge of the Chained Isles? Saints were creatures of another breed. It wasn't a coincidence that there were only a few dozen of them across all of humanity. They were not only the most powerful, but also the most skilled, strong-willed, brilliant, and deviously cunning members of the human race. Each was a force to be reckoned with. Nothing less would suffice if one wanted to survive the harrowing trial of the third nightmare. He wasn't sure of his ability to fool such a person. Sunny forced out a weak smile. It would be my pleasure. The young woman nodded, then turned around, obviously expecting him to follow. Sunny sighed, then dismissed the covetous cover and stood up from the rock. It was time to face Sky Tide again. The graceful stone chateau perched on top of the tall menhirs of the sanctuary was just as Sunny had remembered it. The open pavilion at the very edge of the ancient monolith had not changed, as well. It was bathed in sunlight and exposed to winds, opening to a breathtaking view of the Chained Isles. The ivory tower floated far above, shrouded in white clouds. This time, there was a simple meal served for 3 people on the round table in the center of the pavilion, and both Master Roan and Saint Tyrus were preparing to eat. The young woman led Sunny to them, gestured to a free chair, and then moved to stand silently by Sky Tide's side. Sunny lingered for a bit, then said awkwardly, Greetings, Lady Tyrus, Master Roan. It's an honor to be invited to join you for dinner. Lunch? Yeah. To join you for lunch. Saint Tyrus simply nodded and didn't say anything, but Master Roan looked at him and grinned. Then, he gestured to the food on the table. What are you waiting for, Sunless? Dig in. Food's growing cold. Sunny hesitated for a moment, then smiled. If there was one rule he tried to follow faithfully in his life, it was to never refuse free food. Master Roan didn't have to ask him twice. Chapter 467 Dinner with a Saint. It seemed that the conversation was not going to happen until after the meal, which suited Sunny fine. Not only did he get to enjoy a simple, but delicious food provided by the White Feather clan, but he also received a bit more time to think about what he was going to say, and how. Sunny focused his attention on the plate in front of him, and after a few moments, a delighted smile found its way onto his face. That's really good. Noticing it, Master Roan chuckled. You like it? Well, I am not going to say that I cooked it myself, because that would be a lie, but I did hunt the beast with my own 2 hands. I also watched and gave very wise advice when Tyrus was planting the vegetables. Sunny choked. Tyrus planted what? Sky Tide grew these vegetables herself? The image of the stern saint doing gardening did not fit into his mind at all. He threw a furtive glance at the unnaturally beautiful woman, and swallowed. Yeah, can't imagine it. Saint Tyrus was calmly eating, not a single emotion appearing on her face. At the mention of her name, she looked at her husband for a second, and then returned to her meal without reacting in any way. Sunny didn't know if she was simply like that around strangers, or always aloof. In any case, it was hard to picture Sky Tide doing mundane things like gardening. Not knowing what to think of it, he lingered for a few moments, then said awkwardly, Yes. Thank you, it's very tasty. It was too good, in fact. The food was disappearing from his plate at a concerning speed, which meant that he had to sort out his thoughts fast. Basically, there were 3 things about his recent adventure that were better kept secret. The first one was the miraculous coins and their connection to the sanctuary of Noctis. The second was Mordred, despite the fact that Effie and Kai had easily believed him. Telling total strangers that there were voices in his head was not the best of decisions. Besides that, Sunny got the feeling that the Lost Prince might have been in not-so-friendly relationship with the emissaries of the Valor clan that resided on the Chained Isle. Sky Tide did not serve Valor directly, but her clan was still allied to the rulers of Bastion, to the point that one might have gone so far as to call them a vassal clan. And lastly, there was the whole thing about the ebony and ivory towers. The connection between them, and the Seed of Nightmare. If it threatened to create a gate at any moment, he would have felt obligated to inform the White Feather clan, so that someone else could destroy it before that happened. But since the seed was far from blooming, he wanted it all for himself. However, Sunny suspected that he will have to sacrifice one of these secrets to keep the others intact. The question was, which one? Finally, the food was gone from their plates, and the young woman in white poured beautiful ember tea into their cups. Sunny blew on his, and glanced at Master Roan. So, not to appear impolite, sir, but to what do I owe the pleasure? Here it comes, he hesitated, then added. Is it about my friends making a ruckus after I have gone on an unusually long expedition? You weren't too inconvenienced by having to look for me, were you? He was expecting a confirmation, but instead, a surprised expression appeared on the strapping master's face. Look for you? Oh, why would we look for you? Noticing that Sunny was confused, he remained silent for a moment, and then smiled. There must have been a misunderstanding. Nightingale and Raised by Wolves did, indeed, bring your disappearance to the attention of our clan. I was going to explore the places where you had been seen last to investigate, but luckily, Lady Cash arrived at the sanctuary just in time. She informed us that you would return in a few weeks, so we didn't have to worry. A tense smile froze on Sunny's face. She did? Well, I'm glad your time wasn't wasted then. Damn it. Damned Cassie and her damned visions. How much does she know? He took a sip of tea to hide his expression behind the cup for a second. That changed things. On purpose or not, Cassie had helped him avoid the scrutiny of having to explain his absence to the White Feather clan. That, however, posed another problem, and that problem was Song of the Fallen herself. The timing of her visit to the sanctuary of Noctis and this strange action of hers were probably not a coincidence. What was she playing at? Or was he being too paranoid, looking for a meaning where there was none? Cassie was not some Machiavellian mastermind, after all, unlike Sunny and Nephi's both. At least she had not been. Putting down the cup, Sunny cleared his throat. But then, why did you invite me? Master Roan smiled and produced a folded piece of paper from his pocket. Oh, it was just to hand you this. Lady Cassia left you a message before leaving on an expedition with her cohort. Sunny tried to seem calm and nonchalant as he took the piece of paper and unfolded it. Inside, 2 words were written in awkward handwriting. Desecrated Grove. They were, without a doubt, left by Cassie. After becoming blind, writing was hard for her. That's why the penmanship seemed so crude. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Desecrated Grove. Sunny had heard of that place. It lay west of the sanctuary, separated from it by a stretch of long chains. The grove itself was not the most deadly of territories, but there were several corrupted creatures nesting on islands in close vicinity to it. Had Cassie known that he would want to speak to her, and left him a direction to where to find her, why would she lead her cohort to that remote place, which was situated as far from the Hollow Mountains as one could get on the Chained Isles? Strange. Sunny folded the note, put it under the vambrace of the puppeteer's shroud, and smiled. Thank you? Things like that weren't too strange. Since he had gone on a long expedition and missed Cassie, who was planning to remain in the dream realm for a while herself, it was logical to communicate through messages. She could have just sent one to his communicator although, if he was honest with himself, there was a big chance that he would ignore the message if she had. Sunny finished his tea, and then asked cautiously. So, I can go? Master Roan shrugged. Sure. It was nice to see you again, Sunless. I hear your emporium is doing well. Sunny couldn't believe his luck. Expressing his gratitude, he rose to leave. Just as he did, though, Saint Tyrus spoke for the first time. Piercing him with a penetrating gaze, she said evenly, Have you been to the Reckoning Island? He froze. Under the stare of Sky Tide, twisting the truth didn't seem that wise anymore. Sunny hesitated, then said simply, Yes. Saint Tyrus looked at him for a few moments, then turned away. Next time someone asks, say no. Taken aback, Sunny stared at the stunningly beautiful woman for a bit, gathered his courage, and then quietly asked, May I know why? Sky Tide kept her gaze at the breathtaking vista of the Chained Isles below them. Then, in a calm voice, she answered, You may not. Chapter 468 Desecrated Grove. Sunny descended from the White Feather's eyrie in a complicated mood. If he ever had doubts that the lost prince was harboring dire secrets, now there were none. Why else would Saint Tyrus caution him to not speak about the mirror beast, who had seemingly been the only trace left of Mordred's existence. Mordred had conquered the first nightmare when he was only 12. Such an individual, surely, would have been as famous as Nephi's back in the real world. And yet, Sunny had never heard of him, or of anyone who had accomplished the same feat. It was almost as if someone very powerful had purposefully erased any mention of the mysterious prince from history. How had he lost his physical body, to begin with? And where was his spirit body in the dream realm? Did he even have one? He must have had it once, at least. The pack Sunny had found on the reckoning contained a detailed map of the Chain Isles, with the word Hope written on it next to a question mark. Back then, he thought that the owner of the pack had been killed by the mirror beast. Now, however, he suspected that it had belonged to Mordred himself. So, the lost prince had at least visited the Chained Isles before disappearing. Was the great clan Valor complicit in his disappearance? Sunny had no real reason to come to that conclusion, other than the fact that the Chained Isles were in their sphere of influence, and that St. Tyrus hinted at her knowledge of the nature of the mirror beast. But why hadn't she killed it herself? I am going to have to ask Mordred a lot of questions when he appears, which wasn't going to happen for many days, sadly. Until then, Sunny had other matters to attend to. He glanced at the sun and judged that it had barely reached its zenith. The moon wasn't going to appear for a while, so, even though the desire to place his precious coins on the altar gnawed on him, he decided to address the most pressing problem first. Cassie. No matter how reluctant Sunny was to face his former friend, he had to speak to her. He couldn't make plans for the future without knowing who would be by his side as he challenged the second nightmare, and he absolutely needed to challenge it. Collecting essence was fine, but becoming a master would change the power dynamic between him and Nephi's much more. And even though creating future cores would be harder after he achieved a higher rank, being an Ascended also meant that there would be much fewer things out there that could squash him like a bug, not only among the nightmare creatures, but also among the humans. The more crumbs of information about the sovereigns Sunny learned, the more disturbed he became. He was distrustful by nature, so he didn't believe that these hidden overlords would not try to exert their influence on him or try to destroy him one day, simply by virtue of being able to do so. And even without this threat, there were hundreds of Master in the world, which meant that there were hundreds of people who could kill him without breaking a sweat. But if he became a Master himself, well, then there would only be a few dozen individuals he would have to be really wary of. Like St. Tyrus, not to mention that, as an Ascended, he would be free to come and go from the dream realm as he wished. He would even be able to abandon it forever, and never come back. Wouldn't that be a nice choice to have? So, the desecrated grove it is. Sunny frowned, then returned to his room, took out his map from the covetous coffer, and spent some time adding all the details he remembered from Mordred's map onto it. Soon, he was in possession of an intricately detailed depiction of most of the Chained Isles on his hands, complete with descriptions of what dangers he was likely to meet, and where, with its help, traveling to his destinations was going to be much safer. Sunny studied the route to the desecrated grove and sighed. Shouldn't be too hard. I can probably reach it by morning, and return to the sanctuary the next day at night, when the moon is high in the sky, and finally get to use the coins he had bled so much to earn. He dismissed the covetous coffer, stretches his limbs, and headed toward the exit from the sanctuary. The journey to the remote island that Cassie named in her note indeed turned out to be uneventful. Sunny rode the heavenly chains in the form of the shadow and traversed the islands on foot, avoiding any nightmare creature that crossed his path. The southern part of the Chained Isles was relatively safe, or at least safer than the northern part. Well, no surprise, it was bordering regions of the Dream Realm that had been tamed by humans more than a decade ago, while to the north there was nothing except for the dreadful Hollow Mountains. The desecrated grove itself was somewhat near the main route from one of the great chains, which connected all of the Chained Isles to the rest of the Dream Realm, to the sanctuary of Noctis. People who were either coming to or leaving the region used that route to travel between the Great Chain and the Citadel, so it was often patrolled by the White Feather forces. Sunny traveled along the established route, then left it to go deeper into the dangerous wilderness of the Flying Islands. He carefully avoided all the places where corrupted nightmare creatures were known to dwell, and kept his eyes open for any sign of danger. However, nothing that couldn't be avoided happened. None of the islands Sunny wanted to cross were rising, so he even managed to escape having to endure the crushing. The sun rolled down over the horizon and disappeared, and the moon followed its example. As the first light of dawn ignited in the east, Sunny flew through the shadows and then soared high into the air, cresting the edge of a large island and softly landing on its soil. The desecrated grove. He had arrived. Sunny let out a heavy sigh. He had almost hoped that some terrible monstrosity would attack him on the way, making it so he wouldn't have to meet Cassie. The searing mess of emotions he felt toward her was much scarier than any nightmare creature could ever hope to be. At the end of the day, humans were much harder to deal with than monsters. Chapter 469 Firekeepers. The desecrated grove was a large island, its surface overtaken almost entirely by a forest of twisted, charred, dead trees. The ground was covered by a thick layer of ash, which was often thrown into the air by the strong winds. Gray flakes rained down from the sky. There were many nightmare creatures nesting in the dark forest, and although most of them were only of the awakened rank, one had to be careful to not get ambushed, surrounded, or stumble upon an especially ferocious abomination. Sunny couldn't even begin to guess why Cassie would choose such a place to establish a camp. However, he could already see the signs of human presence. There were 4 chains connecting the desecrated grove to other islands, but the one he himself had used was the most convenient. Any sane leader would have chosen the same route, and even though the crushing was capable of making anyone's path unpredictable, the other 3 were just too much of a risk. That's why Sunny wasn't surprised to see human footprints leading toward the menacing wall of blackened dead trees, already mostly covered by a new layer of ash. There were also signs of a battle, with several misshapen carcasses laying on the ground and showing clear signs of their soul shards being removed. Judging by the fact that they were only partially devoured by the scavenging nightmare creatures, Cassie's cohort must have passed through no more than a week ago. Sighing, Sunny tied a piece of cloth around his mouth and nose, summoned the cruel sight, and started following the footprints. Soon, he entered the ashen veil of the twisted forest. His ability to see through any shadow proved to be invaluable once again. If not for that gift, he would have been scared witless, expecting a sudden attack to come from the surrounding darkness at any moment. With his sight, the shadow sense, and the ability to see all around himself with the help of one of the shadows, Sunny felt confident that nothing would be able to get close to him unnoticed, at least not on this comparatively tame island. But that was the thing about the Dream Realm. Even creatures that were supposed to be easy to deal with could kill you in a second if you weren't careful enough. Tame or not, everywhere in this godforsaken world was a potential death trap. As Sunny went deeper into the forest, he discovered more signs of Cassie's cohort passing through. There were marks left behind by violent skirmishes, as well as several abandoned campsites. It seemed as though the Firekeepers had been taking their time, slowly exploring the path ahead and moving their camp further and further into the depth of the desecrated grove after clearing a long stretch of it. Why travel here all the way from the Night Temple? She had to cross the entire region, getting away from the Hollow Mountains, only to get stuck on an unexceptional island. I just don't get it. Sunny was clearly missing something. With a slight frown, he turned into a shadow and glided through the darkness, covering much more distance with every minute than he had been on foot. He still preferred to be cautious, though, sending one of the shadows ahead and moving slow enough to be able to react in time if something unexpected happened. After an hour or so, he finally found them. Cassie and her cohort were camped at a secluded clearing that was around halfway to the heart of the island, dangerously far removed from the edge. If the desecrated grove entered the ascent phase, the time window for them to get back to the chain before the crushing became deadly would be extremely narrow. Since it was early morning, most of the members were asleep, with only 2 lookouts standing watch with torches in their hands. Sonny observed them for a few seconds from the shadows, and then sent his own forward. He recognized both of the watchmen, since they had spent a lot of time together during the struggle for the throne of the Bright Castle, as fellow members of Neff's faction. The Fire Keepers were comprised of about 40 survivors of the Forgotten Shore. Those who had decided against pledging their allegiance to the legacy clans that wanted to recruit them, as well as the government, and had not become fully independent like Effie and Sonny had. Although Cassie was their nominal leader, she didn't command the whole host herself. Instead, Neff's followers were divided into several cohorts, each operating in different regions of the Dream Realm. Fire Keepers were not a formal organization, but more of a loose alliance of people who shared similar beliefs and principles, the main being the hope that Changing Star was going to return alive one day. Sonny's shadow entered the circle of light created by one of the torches, glared at the lookout, and then waved at him. The young man stared at it with wide eyes. "What the hell?" The other swiftly turned, summoning her weapon. "What is it?" The first one remained silent for a moment, then sighed. "Ah, crap." He massaged his temple, as if experiencing a headache. "I think it's Sonny." There were 8 people in Cassie's cohort, every one of them a familiar face. Well, Sonny more or less knew all of the survivors of the Forgotten Shore, had fought with them back to back, so that wasn't surprising. What did surprise him, though, was how warm they welcomed him, even if some were clearly displeased with having to wake up a bit early and wary of his entrepreneurial ambitions, which they had been amply subjected to during the war for the Bright Castle. They were still clearly happy to see Sonny. Soon, his shoulder began to hurt a little from all the friendly slaps it received. "Would you look at that? 4 months on these damned islands, and this is the first time we actually cross paths. How have you been, Sonny?" "Oh, I was so sad that we missed you in the sanctuary. Glad you decided to visit." Sonny smiled weakly and responded to their greetings, feeling both strangely warm inside and extremely uncomfortable with all the attention. Truth be told, he was glad to meet them again, too. He still couldn't quite believe that anyone had escaped the Forgotten Shore, let alone a whole 100 of young men and women, some of whom were in front of him right now. After the greetings were done, he looked around and raised an eyebrow. Sure, guys. Likewise. But where's Cassie?" The Fire Keepers glanced at each other, then one of them smiled. "Oh, right. You must be dying to see her." "Not exactly." The girl who spoke shook her head and turned toward a path leading somewhere away from the camp. "Let's go. I'll take you." Not too far from the camp, a deep hole was dug near the roots of one of the dead trees. Beside it, with her back to him, stood a delicate girl with pale blonde hair and an elegant rapier hanging in a scabbard on her belt. Hearing their footsteps, Cassie turned around. A small smile appeared on her face. "Sonny! You've made it!" Chapter 470. Come winter, Cassie had changed since the last time they met. Her hair was longer, and there was a strange silver half-mask covering her eyes, its surface blind and intricately engraved. It matched the polished steel of the armor she was wearing on top of a midnight blue coat, comprised of a short cuirass, vambraces, greaves, and a segmented pauldron. The quiet dancer hung on her belt, but there was also a long dagger opposite it, its guard twisting upward. What changed most of all, however, was her demeanor. The blind girl seemed much older somehow. Firmer, poised, but also weary. As if pressed down upon by the weight of years. "What? What years? She's younger than me." Sonny struggled a little, then pretended to smile, too, for the benefit of the young Fire Keeper who no doubt expected a warm reunion. No one knew what had happened between them, after all. "Yeah. I received your note, cryptic as it was. And here I am. In the flesh." The girl who had led him to Cassie glanced at them, then made an excuse and went back to the camp, tactfully deciding to remove herself from what she thought was going to be an emotional meeting of 2 old friends. Former friends, really. Sunny hesitated a little, then asked, "So, how have you been?" Cassie sighed, then turned back to the excavated roots of the charred tree. After a while she spoke. "Not so good, actually." Her voice sounded distant. We have tried to venture into the Hollow Mountains, as you must know. But it was hopeless. That place is pure death, for anyone who dares set foot into the mist. We hoped to find a way back to the Forgotten Shore. In the end, however, we were lucky to simply escape alive. Cassie remained silent for a bit, then asked, "What about you?" Sunny grinned. "Me? Oh, I've never been better." With that, he summoned the covetous coffer, fished out some fresh, fragrant fruit from it, and sat down on a nearby stump. Taking a big bite out of a juicy peach, he chewed it with gusto, and then glanced at the blind girl. "Oh, sorry. I only brought enough for one." Yes, Sunny knew that he was being ridiculously petty. But so what? Pettiness was his middle name. Figuratively speaking. "So, you failed to return to the Forgotten Shore, and now, what are you doing exactly? Why are you digging up trees in this vile forest?" Cassie smiled a little, then answered evenly, "I am looking for something." Then, she turned away from the hole and faced him. "Yes, I told the White Feather Clan that you will return alive. No, I did not see a vision of where you were, and what you did in the past month." Sunny stared at her with a dark expression. What is this? She can read minds now? And no, I can't read minds. If you must know, my second ability allows me to sense what will happen in the next few seconds. That's why I can walk around without a cane, and knew what you were going to say. He grimaced. "That's going to be very annoying, I think." Sunny looked at Cassie, reevaluating her armor and weapons. With an ability like that, she might have become a very formidable fighter. Or not. He didn't really understand how it worked, to tell the truth. So, he asked curiously, "Does that mean that you can see now?" Cassie shook her head. "No, not exactly. But if I want to take a step forward, and sense falling into a ravine, I can walk around it instead. If I sense being pierced by a sword, I can try to deflect it. And if I sense being asked a question, I can answer it." He thought for a bit, then said, "So, what is my next question?" The blind girl simply shook her head. "I don't need to waste soul essence to guess. You want to know how I knew that you will come back to the sanctuary in one piece." Sunny finished his fruit, threw the pit into the hole, then smiled. "Indeed. If you did not spy on my recent adventures, then how did you know that I wasn't going to die?" Cassie lingered for a bit, then turned away. After a while she said, "It's still spring." He scowled. "What does that have to do with anything? You knew that I would be fine because it's spring?" Cassie smiled. "Yes. I knew that you wouldn't die. Because you see..." She paused for a moment, and then said calmly, "I already saw you die in winter. Both of us, actually." After Cassie dropped that bomb, Sunny simply stared at her for a whole minute, his eyes wide and the words refusing to come out of his mouth. Finally, he gritted his teeth and hissed, "What the hell? You saw us die?" Cassie sighed, then gave him a simple nod. "Yes," Sunny growled. "Elaborate." The blind girl hesitated for a little while, then asked evenly, "Are you sure you want to know? You've seen what happened the last time I shared my vision with someone, and tried to challenge fate." A dark, resentful expression appeared on Sunny's face. With his voice full of anger, he spat. "Who cares? Tell me what you saw this instant." Cassie sighed and turned to face him. "All right. But remember what happened to the three of us before. How we tried to deceive fate, but were played by fate instead." She grew quiet for a moment, and then said, "This is what I saw. There was a crumbling island falling into the sky below, and the two of us, bloodied, mangled, and weak, falling down with it. It was snowing. Above us, a giant bird flew, wreathed in thunderclouds. It was fighting a terrifying black wyvern, their blood falling down like rain. Then the darkness swallowed us, and we were gone. Cassie looked down, then added solemnly, "That was how we died." Chapter 471 Quid Pro Quo. And Cassie was done speaking, Sonny remained silent for a bit. Then he said, "Anything else? More details?" The blind girl shook her head. "Because of the blizzard, it was hard to see what surrounded the crumbling island, and it was already too damaged to recognize it. So, no more details." You were wearing a metal armor, I think?" "Not the puppeteer's shroud." Sonny massaged his temples with a bleak expression on his face. "Well, it's not as bad as I expected." Cassie tilted her head a little. "It's not?" A dark smile appeared on his lips. "We already know that your visions are easy to misinterpret. You haven't seen us die, really, right? The light go out of our eyes, our bodies being torn apart, and so on. You just saw us badly injured and falling into the darkness. So what? I have already fallen into the sky below once, and here I am, good as new." The blind girl hesitated. "You fell into the sky below?" Sonny waved a hand dismissively. "Yes, but that doesn't matter." "Wait, no, actually it does matter. It's the reason I came to see you. I have almost forgotten because of this charming revelation of yours." After that, he grew silent, thinking about Cassie's vision of their death. Despite Sonny's bravado, inside, he wasn't as nonchalant about it as he wanted to appear. Yes, her visions had been misleading in the past, but not all of them. Some were as straightforward as possible. And yes, although he had already gone through the endless void below the chained owls once, there was no guarantee that he would survive it second time, not unless he had chosen to do so himself. After the twisted rock was destroyed by the crushing, Sonny managed to survive due to 3 reasons. One of them was Mordred, one was that he had already been near the tear, and the other was the "Where is my eye?" enchantment that he had used in a moment of desperation. That enchantment had almost killed him, itself, and only failed to do so because his already exhausted shadow essence ran out just at the right time. If his reserves had not been depleted, and he was forced to endure staring into the eternity of fate for a few seconds more, his mind would have been destroyed completely. If he was thrown into the sky below once more, away from the tear, there would be a very slim chance of him finding the rift in the ocean of divine flame again. Especially if he was as badly wounded as Cassie implied, and there were giant birds fighting wyverns in the sky above. So, what he had to do now was, well, what the hell was he supposed to do? The vision did not provide any actionable information. The only thing Sonny could think of was to work really hard to get himself a flight-capable memory or echo before winter, and maybe make a will. He sighed. "So, what have you been doing to prevent the 2 of us from dying? How can you calmly dig around in the mud, knowing what is going to happen?" Cassie lingered for a moment, then smiled. "In fact, I am digging around in the mud for that very reason." Sonny snorted. "What are you hoping to find there? A pair of wings?" She shook her head. "No. I am just hoping to find a preserved root." "A root? What can a root do to save us from dying?" He kept quiet for a bit, then said, "All right. Suit yourself. Anyway, I wanted to talk with you about something." Cassie looked into the depths of the forest, then nodded. "About what?" Sonny gathered his thoughts, then explained. "I have found a nightmare seed. A very special one, that contains a very special second nightmare. And I want to challenge it after the winter solstice. Actually, scratch that. I want to challenge it by the end of the autumn." His initial plan was to give himself and his companions 7 months to prepare, but considering what Cassie saw happening in winter, these plans had to change. Whatever it was that she predicted, facing it as a master would be much more desirable than facing it as an awakened, unless her vision took place inside the nightmare, of course. Regardless, now, he decided to return to the ivory tower before the autumn was over. 6 months was a tight amount of time to get ready, but now so different from his initial plan. He could make it work, provided that other people whom he wanted to take with him would too. That seed is also located in a very special place. In fact, it's right above our heads, in the ivory tower. I found a way to get there without being killed by the crushing, although that other path is, arguably, just as dangerous. Sunny pointed down. It's in the sky below. Effie and Kai are coming to the Shen's Isles to join me. We hope that you will challenge the nightmare with us, too. Oh, and we'll need your help getting into the Night Temple. There's an item we need to retrieve there. Cassie faced him and remained silent for a while. With her eyes being hidden by a mask and her face unmoving, it was hard to tell what she was feeling or thinking about. Finally, she said, "You want me to join? After what I have done to you?" Unseen to her, a cold expression appeared on Sunny's face. He looked at the blind girl for a long time, then shrugged. "Why not? We don't have to be friends to go into a nightmare together. We don't even need to like each other. We can just be temporary allies. Wasn't that what I was to you anyway? If you can handle that, so can I. I don't mind being used, as long as I get to use you in return. Pretty simple." Cassie turned away and didn't say anything for a few moments. Then she answered, "All right. I will go to the Night Temple with you, and help you conquer the second nightmare. But I want your help with something in return." Sunny raised an eyebrow. "My help? With what?" The blind girl hesitated for a second, and then said, "You have been to the Shipwreck Island, haven't you? The creature that dwells there. In a few months, I want you to help me kill it." Sunny stared at the blind girl with surprise clearly written on his face. Allowing this surprise to seep into his voice, he asked, "The vine creature? You want to kill that thing?" "Why would she want to attempt to do something that dangerous?" Cassie nodded. "Yes." He shook his head. "That bastard sprawls through the entire island, its vines buried underground. It is corrupted, which means that our weapons will barely be able to cut it. And if that was not bad enough, the vines produce clouds of deadly poison. Are you sure that you want to attack it?" The blind girl lingered for a few moments, then answered calmly. "It is a corrupted monster, indeed. It is terrifying and lethal, yes. But I am sure that we can destroy it, with enough preparation. Everyone has weaknesses, after all. That creature is susceptible to fire, for example. There must be other things we might be able to exploit, too." Sunny thought for a while, then shrugged. "Fine. I will help your cohort fight the monstrosity on the Shipwreck Island. I will not promise that we will succeed, though." Cassie sighed. "Then we have a deal. My cohort and I will remain in the desecrated growth until our business here is done. I expect it to take a month, at least. Maybe more. After, we will return to the sanctuary, recuperate, and proceed to the Shipwreck Island." She paused for a moment, and then added, "And then I will help you challenge the second nightmare." Sunny smiled. "If we don't die before that, you mean?" The blind girl turned back to the roots of the dead tree. "Yes. If we don't die before that." On his way back to the sanctuary, Sunny had a lot to think about. Firstly, there was the fact that he would have to cooperate with Cassie again, which made him feel all sorts of complicated emotions. The manner of their relationship, at least, was set clear. It was purely an alliance of convenience, and nothing else. He could put away his resentment for the sake of mutual benefit. After all, Sunny could be a very pragmatic person when he needed to be. Secondly, there was the perspective of returning to the wreck of the ancient ship, this time to do battle with the vine monster that ruled over the island. Sunny knew very well how dangerous that thing was, so he had a lot of preparations to do if he wanted to come out of that fight in one piece. The divine flame augmentation of the cruel sight, however, was going to come in very handy. And lastly, there was the ominous prediction that Cassie had made about both of them dying sometime in winter. Or falling into the sky below, at least. That, he didn't even know what to think about that. However, Sonny was not going to let this vision affect his decisions. The last time he had tried to act on the knowledge received through Cassie's prophetic gift did not end well for him, or anyone, for that matter. The best thing to do was to keep it in his mind, but continue to act as if nothing had changed. At least he thought that this was the best course. Tired and mentally exhausted from the long journey to and back from the desecrated grove, Sonny approached the sanctuary of Noctis in the middle of the night. His shadow essence reserves were almost depleted, and his head buzzed from all the thoughts swarming inside of it. Landing on the soft grass and hearing the familiar sound of water falling over the edge of the island, Sonny gritted his teeth. Forget about it for now. First things first, the moon was high in the sky, which meant that he was finally going to get his sweet, enchanting reward. His desire to find the source of the miraculous coins the dead chain worm had brought with it to the Iron Hand Island started this whole ordeal, and now, the coins would be its end. His prize was waiting for him up ahead, entering the sanctuary. Sonny walked through the empty garden and approached the clear pond in its center. Stopping for a couple of moments to make sure that no one was watching him, he then crossed the stone path leading to the small island in its center. There, a white altar stood in the shade of an ancient tree, and an obsidian knife lay on its surface. The moment of truth, Sonny summoned the covetous coffer, took out one of the gold coins out of it, and placed it on the altar. The coin shimmered, reflecting the moonlight, and then disappeared. Your shadow grows stronger. A big smile appeared on Sonny's face. Summoning the runes, he read Shadow Fragments, 224/2000. It works! Initially, Sonny thought of going about using the coins in a slow and deliberate manner, throwing a dozen or so on the altar each time he had to return to the real world, to minimize the chances of being noticed and well as arising suspicion. But now that the reward was in his sight, he decided against it. No, he wanted all of it, right now. He deserved it. Putting the wooden box on the altar, he turned it to the side, and then put his hand inside. A moment later, a stream of golden coins flowed onto the white surface. Then, they all started to disappear. Your shadow grows stronger. Your shadow grows stronger. Your shadow grows stronger. ******. In the end, Sonny ended up sacrificing all 1,400 or so coins to the altar. Frightened to believe that it actually happened, he summoned the runes again, then rubbed his eyes, and read the line describing his shadow fragments 3 times in a row, just to make sure that his eyes weren't deceiving to him. Luckily, they weren't. The runes now showed shadow fragments. 1657/2000. I did it. I did it! In the first 2 months on the Chained Isles, Sonny worked really hard to hunt down nightmare creatures and slay them. And yet, he had only been able to collect 200 fragments. His last journey, harrowing as it had been, though, gave him so much more. A wide grin appeared on Sonny's face. Who said that greed is a sin? It's a virtue. A goddamn virtue, I say. Because of the sudden influx of so many shards, Sonny got disoriented and swayed. His body was subtly rebuilding itself, growing stronger, more powerful. The difference was stark enough for him to feel it with every fiber of his being. As awakened absorbed soul shards, or shadow fragments, in his case, the capacity of their cores grew, and their physical capability was slightly enhanced. Usually it happened at such small increments that the difference was hard to judge, but this time, Sonny had done something pretty preposterous and consumed 1,400 shadow fragments all at once. He wondered if anyone else in history had accomplished the same feat. Not likely. Grabbing the edge of the altar to support himself, he endured the strange and euphoric sensation as best as he could. How could anyone do such a thing? If, as far as Sonny knew, everyone except Nephi and him were limited to having only one core? They wouldn't even be able to absorb this much. Back on the Forgotten Shore, Sonny had gone from having almost no shadow fragments to fully saturating his core at 1,000. In the process, he went from being no different from a mundane human, to the pinnacle of humanly possible, to breaking past those limits. Becoming an awakened had elevated him even further above what was considered normal. He was much stronger and faster than any mundane human could ever hope to be, and capable of enhancing his prowess even more with essence, achieving truly superhuman might. And now, he went through a transformation that was similar in scale to his rise on the Forgotten Shore, becoming so much more powerful. In fact, he was now probably the strongest awakened both in the waking world and in the dream realm, with the exception of those whose aspects directly enhanced their physique, and even then, he could still double, even triple his physical ability with the help of the shadows. Insane! Sunny drew in a deep breath, then silently flexed his muscles, feeling a new strength course through his veins. He felt incredible. Incredibly strong, incredibly fast, incredibly resilient. But that wasn't all. The capacity of both of his shadow cores was also dramatically enhanced, almost doubling in a matter of seconds. Therefore, his reserves of shadow essence were now also much deeper. That meant that he could fight at his peak form for longer, use the active enhancements of his memories more, remain in the form of a shadow for a bigger amount of time, control his shadows at a larger distance, and travel further when using Shadow Step. In short, Sunny had just become even more of a menace. Slowly getting accustomed to his new and improved physique, he couldn't help but smile. Now that he had finally made use of the miraculous coins, his previous disaster of an expedition came into perspective. Despite how much he had suffered and how close he had brushed with death, it all felt worth it, somehow. His goal was to grow stronger, and Sunny had just made a big step toward that goal. It felt good. While Sunny was consumed with triumphant thoughts, his gaze fell on the obsidian knife that lay on the altar. He lingered for a while, then cautiously reached with his hand and touched the cold stone handle. Will it work? That knife remained on the altar of the sanctuary for as long as humans lived there. Pretty much every awakened that had ever set foot into the citadel tried to raise it off the white surface at least once, including Sunny, but none of them succeeded. The knife seemed to weigh more than the entire island itself, as if it was glued to the altar. No matter how much people tried, no one had ever managed to move it even by a millimeter. However, when Sunny used the miraculous coins for the first time, he seemed to have noticed that the obsidian knife moved a little. Therefore, he had made a conclusion that if he were to place enough coins on the altar, the knife might become detached from it, and fall into his hands, holding his breath. Sunny wrapped his fingers around the handle. Here goes nothing? Putting all of his strength into the pull, he tried to lift the obsidian blade of the altar. The knife, however, offered no resistance at all. It behaved like any knife would, easily sliding off the white stone, which then caused Sunny to lose his balance and tumble to the ground in a graceless roll. Sitting up, he stared at the knife in his hand with wild eyes. Then he shuddered. Crap! Sunny half expected for the entire sanctuary to suddenly plunge into the sky below, or for the gateway to stop functioning. That's why he wanted to just lift the knife a little, and then place it back down if something had gone awry. Instead, he was now a few steps away from the altar, with no way of getting back to it immediately. Luckily, none of his fears came true. Despite the fact that the obsidian knife had left its usual spot on the altar, the island seemed fine. Everything was just as it had been a few seconds ago. He exhaled with visible relief. Well, good. I wouldn't want to mess things up too bad for everyone here on the Chained Isles. Rising to his feet, Sunny looked at the obsidian knife. It seemed to have been cut from a single piece of black stone, with its blade sharpened and polished. There wasn't anything special in how the knife looked. In fact, it seemed a little bit crude, almost primitive. There was also one little problem. The knife did not turn into a memory. Sunny had expected it to disintegrate into a rain of sparks and enter his core, just like Weaver's mask had done, or like shard memories behaved when raised by a new wielder. Mordred had mentioned something to that effect when speaking about the ivory knife in the Night Temple. He told Sunny that one had to spill blood on the black altar, to receive a memory of the blade that rested on its surface. But the obsidian knife did no such thing. It just remained in his hand, as material and palpable as one could imagine. What was even stranger, though, was that the knife didn't appear to have a spell weave. It was, without a doubt, a magical item. Sonny could feel that it was, even if he didn't know what properties that entailed. However, when he looked beneath the surface of the knife, he didn't see the familiar pattern of ethereal strings weaving themselves around anchoring lights. What he saw instead was just brilliant radiance, as though the knife was filled to the brim with soul essence. And in that radiance was just a single string. It wasn't the same type of ethereal string, though it was a Sonny frowned. A string of fate. A single string of fate was somehow placed inside the obsidian knife, folding on itself endlessly, with its two ends connected to create a perfect, never-ending circle. Sonny stared at the strange string for a while, and then furrowed his brow. Now, what is that all about? Sonny studied the obsidian knife for a while, and concluded that he had no idea what this thing was supposed to be capable of. It wasn't a memory, and it didn't have a weave, so either the spell nor his own ability to perceive and somewhat understand such things could help him. The only thing Sonny knew for certain was that someone had plucked a string from the tapestry of fate and placed it inside the knife, making a circle out of it, for some mysterious purpose. Everything else was going to have to wait until the next time he heard from Mordred. The Lost Prince was bound to know more about the obsidian knife, since he seemed to know a lot about the Chained Isles and their past in general. Now, however, Sonny had to deal with another problem. He had to explain the disappearance of the knife to the White Feather Clan, somehow. Come morning, or at any moment really, if someone decided to leave the dream realm or entered it in the middle of the night, people would become aware that the knife that no one had been able to lift or move was now gone. Sonny had no doubt that it was not going to take a long time for them to figure out that it was him who had taken it. And after that, what to do? In the end, he came up with a really crazy idea. Something that he would have never even considered in normal circumstances. Something that went against his very nature. He went and told Master Roan the truth. Well, the part that had to do with the miraculous coins, to be precise. Visiting the White Feather compound in the middle of the night was a bit strange, but luckily for him, the older man turned out to be up. He was preparing to leave on a patrol, and so rose early to make the necessary preparations. After Sonny was done talking, the mighty Griffin Rider stared at him for a while with a perplexed expression. Then, he asked to take a look at the knife. Sonny reluctantly handed the obsidian blade over and watched nervously as Master Roan inspected it. He was really hoping that the White Feather Clan would not decide to keep it. There were very few things Sonny could do if they did. Finally, the strapping master returned the obsidian knife to him and asked curiously, "So you managed to lift it by using Noctis coins on the altar?" Sonny nodded. "Yeah, wait, you know about the coins?" Master Roan nodded. "A few have been found here and there on the Isles over the years. It seems that this was the preferred currency people who lived here thousands of years ago used. No one had ever discovered a literal treasure trove of them, though, as you did." He thought for a bit, and then smiled. "Actually, I think I have one stashed somewhere. Wait here for a bit, all right?" With that, Roan disappeared into the stone chateau, and then returned 10 or so minutes later, holding a familiar golden coin in his hand. "Found it. I used to carry it with me a lot before, as a lucky charm. Let's go." Together, they returned to the altar island. The first thing Master Roan did was glance at the moon, and then placed the coin on the altar. Once again, it gleamed and disappeared, leaving a bewildered expression on the handsome man's face. "I'll be damned. I just received a bit of soul essence." "You were right." He shook his head in astonishment. To think that these coins had such a use all this time, and no one was the wiser. "Good job, Sunless." Then Master Roan hesitated for a few moments and asked, "Can you place the knife back on the altar?" Sonny did as he was asked, and then watched as the mighty Griffin Rider used all of his formidable power in a vain attempt to lift the obsidian blade off the white surface. When he was done with that futile attempt, and stepped back to catch his breath, Sunny simply took hold of the handle and retrieved the knife without any problem. Interesting. Then came the moment of truth. Sunny tensed as he waited for the older man's decision. After thinking about it for a while, Master Roan said, "Well, I don't know if you know this, Sunless, but there is a sacred rule among us awakened in the dream realm. The sanctity of this rule is unassailable and beyond reproach. And that rule is finders keepers." Sunny blinked. "What?" The strapping master grinned. "So you don't have to worry about either me or Tyrus taking that knife from you." Then, however, his smile dimmed. Other people, though, might not be as reasonable. Even if no one knows what power this thing has, or if there even is anything special about it, someone might get too excited and act in a regrettable manner. So I'd advise you to put the knife back on the altar, until the time you feel like using it. Sunny considered his words and had to admit that this, indeed, would be the best decision for now. Master Roan helped him confirm that no one else would be able to take the knife, and carrying it around before venturing into the nightmare had no benefit. Summoning the memory of how exactly the obsidian blade had been placed on the altar, he put it in its previous spot and took a step back. Master Roan nodded. "Good choice. Please do tell us if you find out anything about its purpose, at least if it has anything to do with the well-being of the sanctuary. If need be, we'll compensate you fairly to either take the knife off your hands or lend it for a bit, if that's what you prefer." Sunny agreed to this condition, since it sounded reasonable. With that out of the way, the strapping Griffin Rider looked at him with sparks dancing in his eyes. "So, what are you going to do now?" Sunny frowned. What a weird question. Go home, take a shower, deal with some real-world business. Why? What are you going to do? Master Roan laughed. What do you mean, what I am going to do? I am going to go on my patrol, and then I'll go, coin hunting, of course. I suspect that everyone in the sanctuary is going to be searching for Noctis coins like madmen for quite some time after that discovery of yours. People are going to get really busy. Sunny remained silent for a bit, and then said in a very serious tone, Good luck, then. Oh, and one thing, if you find a big chest full of them, make your griffin stomp on it a few times before coming closer. Better yet, do that to every chest you encounter in the future. Never trust a chest not to eat you, is what I am trying to say. I sure won't. With that, he said goodbye to the handsome master, placed his hand on the altar, and returned to the real world. There was a lot he had to do there. Some time later, Sunny was in his kitchen, eating the breakfast he had just prepared. He was thinking of all the things on his to-do list. They were, in no particular order, selling the soul shards he had brought with him from the dream realm, and setting up a stable method to sell more in the future, returning to the dreamscape to participate in duels on the professional arenas, to practice shadow dance and feed the mantle of the underworld with victories, observing Rain and thinking of a way to deal with that whole situation, learning how to properly fight with a spear, visiting Neff, writing a report about the Noctis coins for Teacher Julius. There were probably more things he had to do, but was forgetting. But he already had enough on his plate. Finishing the breakfast and staring toward the door of the guest bedroom, where Effie still slept while her spirit wandered the dream realm, he shook his head and went out to sit on the porch as he drank some delicious tea. It was early morning. Sunny enjoyed the pleasant view of the terrace district, watched as Rain walked to the public transport hub on her way to school, and then activated his communicator. He was going to start with the simplest of tasks. Navigating to the market section of the network, he habitually imputed his identification number to access the awakened section of it. Sunny had browsed the wares there before, even if back then he barely had enough money to buy anything. Today, however, things were different. Today, he was approaching the network as a seller, not as a buyer. Sunny entered Soul Shards. as the keywords and stared at the listings, appreciating the number of zeros in their prices. It seemed as though the value of shards was not uniform. Of course, the higher rank shards cost much more. But people, strangely, also seemed to care about what nightmare creature the crystal came from, and how it had been defeated. What the hell? Apparently, there were underscore collectors among the wealthy mundane humans who were very interested in this sort of thing. Some superstitious awakened also believed, for some reason, that absorbing bad shards would be detrimental to the purity of their souls. Weirdos. Sunny didn't imbue a lot of things, but one thing he did know was that there was not a single awakened out there with a pure soul. Even the best of them were murderers by nature, and their hearts were painted black by the nightmares they had experienced. Not to mention that there were no bad or good soul shards. They were all pretty much the same, coming from terrible monsters and earned through bloodshed. Anyway, that was something he was going to consider when creating his own listing. After getting the gist of the pricing, Sunny opened the form to create his own digital shop. Without thinking too much, he named it Brilliant Emporium and went on to fill out the entire form. Then, it came the time to put his soul shards into the auction. Sunny wrote simply, 4 soul shards coming from a fallen devil, Mordant Mimic. The creature was killed and eaten by the proprietor of the Brilliant Emporium himself. Before that, the Mordant Mimic had been pretending to be a treasure chest and devouring those lured by the promise of treasure. In the end, it bit off more than it could chew. Satisfied with that, he finalized the listing and stared at it for a bit as if expecting someone to bid instantly. However, nothing of the sort happened. With a sigh, Sunny deactivated the communicator and went back inside. Soon. I will be rich soon. It took several days for all 4 of his soul shard to sell. After that, Sunny had to arrange secure delivery, which was somewhat of a headache on its own. Overall, the process took too much time from his already packed schedule. He also felt that he was missing some crucial knowledge on how to make his business really boom. Even though the product he was trying to sell was first class, there was not a lot of fallen rank soul shard out there. Compared to dormant and awakened ones, the bidding had not really taken off. He did make a sizable amount of money, but not as sizable as it could have been. Still, it was enough to purchase a couple of cheap lower-rank memories. Sunny simply looked for the most useless ones, which no one else would ever want to buy, and made the minimum offer. Whoever it was selling them must have been happy beyond belief to finally be rid of these things. Sunny was going to feed the memories to Saint immediately after receiving them, but before that, he spent a lot of time training with the cruel sight in his underground dojo. He had a solid understanding of how to use a short sword, but a spear was an alien beast to him. Even though Sunny knew the basic rules of combat technique and could perform somewhat effectively while wielding any weapon, he was far, far away from mastering them. How fortunate it was then that he had a renowned spear master, raised by wolves herself, crashing in his guest bedroom. Granted, she couldn't really spar with him due to her condition. But he had Saint for that in the end. The 3 of them spent a lot of time in his basement. Effie was observing and explaining to him what to do, how to do it, and most importantly, what not to do. Saint served as his opponent, and the mighty enemy to polish his nascent skill against, and Sunny found himself once again in the role of a willing punching bag. It was just like in that week they had spent in the hidden chamber of the ruined cathedral in the Dark City. Sunny even got nostalgic, remembering how cozy and nice things had been back then. Now, however, things were much better. Not only was there an unlimited amount of delicious food they could eat during the breaks in his training, there were even medicine and ice baths to ease the pain in his bruised and beaten body. Training with Saint was really effective, but she really didn't know how to pull her punches. Just like that, a few days passed. And then, something that Sunny had been dreading for a while finally, and inevitably, happened. It was time to accompany Kai to the premiere of The Song of Light and Darkness. The novel will be updated first on this website. Come back and continue reading tomorrow, everyone. Chapter 476 A Song of Light and Darkness. Sometime later, Sonny was pondering his life choices while sitting in the back row of a crowded theater. The lights were already off, which obviously meant nothing to him. People seemed to be really excited to see the movie, though, especially Effie, who was to his side, munching on something called popcorn and staring at the screen. In the darkness, somber music started to play, reverberating through the entire space and making the audience shiver. Effie suddenly jabbed her elbow into his ribs. "Do you know who is the composer for this thing? It's Griffin. I don't know how they managed to get him, but he scored the entire movie. Such an honor! Can you believe it?" Sonny had no idea who this Griffin guy was, but judging by Effie's reaction, he was someone famous. Massaging his ribs with a grimace, Sonny offered a stifled answer. "I can." On the screen, the interior of a spacious and beautifully lit room appeared. A small girl with silver hair was playing on a carpet, while a handsome man with dark circles under his eyes was shown studying a map. What the hell was that supposed to be? Nephi's? If so, her hair should have been black. It only turned silver after her first nightmare. Effie giggled. "So cute!" The girl, meanwhile, approached the table and reached to touch the strange sword that lay on it. The blade of the sword was short and misshapen, as though shattered a long time ago. Before the girl could cut herself, though, the man lifted the sword and brought it out of her reach. "This is not a toy, Nephi's." Sonny palmed his face and grimaced. "But Daddy, why is your sword broken?" The man smiled. "So what if it is broken? It is still sharp." Then, he put his hand on the girl's shoulder and looked at her with a very serious expression. "One day you will wield a sword too, darling. When you do, remember one thing: we, awakened, only raise arms to protect humanity. As long as we don't give up, no matter how dire the situation is, there will be hope. Just like this sword, humanity is more resilient than it seems." Sonny tilted his head. "Wait, this doesn't even make sense." The scene, however, was already over. The screen turned black for a few moments, and the movie transitioned into the future. Nephi's, now a languid jade beauty with a slim waist, generous figure, long eyelashes, and mesmerizing gray eyes, was entering the academy. What followed was a long training montage showing her defeating every other sleeper there with a training sword, all the while offering words of wisdom, like, "Never give up hope," or, "Remember your duty," or, "We are humans." The propaganda was so tacky and laid so thick Sonny could help but cringe. The only person the Jade Beauty couldn't defeat was a handsome young man with masculine features, broad shoulders, and a noble bearing. Hanley Castor. Oh no. Oh no, Sonny should have guessed by the invitation Kai had given him, but the director of the movie was obviously hinting at the nascent romantic feelings between the two. Their conversations in the academy seemed to be about swordsmanship, but were also somehow deeply flirtatious. The actors had mad chemistry together. He wanted to vomit, but the audience was clearly enthralled by the two leads. Sonny didn't dwell on this preposterous thing for long, though, because right about then, his own character was introduced. What he spell is this. The actor hired to play him was a literal child. It was a teenage boy of about 13 years of age, with a mischievous grin and a face that, for lack of better words, simply begged to be punched. Worse than that, he was shown as extremely uneducated, clumsy, and naive. In short, Sonny was the comic relief. He turned to Effie in outrage, only to see her laughing silently. "Oh man, who's the casting director for this movie? I need to send them flowers." Even his shadows were laughing. Both of them. Sonny gritted his teeth, promised to exact revenge on Kai and Effie for making him endure this, and turned back to the screen. Finally, Nephi's entered the dream realm and found herself on the forgotten shore. The coral labyrinth and the dark sea were recreated with such detail that he couldn't help but shiver. Well, they did their research, at least. The audience was holding their breaths during Neff's journey to the Dark City. The terrifying nature of the dark tides and the deadly battles with awakened nightmare creatures populating the labyrinth created a truly tense, suffocating atmosphere. Of course, everyone knew that the main character was not going to die in the first half of the movie. But that's where Sunny, as well as Cassie, came into play. Just as he had expected, the movie showed them as a burden that had to be carried by Nephis on her heroic journey. But since very few people knew who Sunny was, his fate was uncertain. Nephis was bound to survive, but what about her friends? And thanks to his character, there were also moments of pleasant levity amidst all the tension. A few times, the whole audience exploded with laughter after Sunny on the screen did something especially stupid or said something really outrageous. He had also slowly developed a catchphrase. It was, "Are you crazy?" That not only allowed the audience to chuckle, but also gave Nephis the opportunity to educate her worthless follower, thus naturally delivering a lot of necessary exposition. The real Sunny wasn't amused, though. Because they weren't laughing with him. They were laughing at him. Idiots! What do you even know? They didn't know anything, since no one really knew what the three of them had gone through on their way to the Dark City. The writer simply came up with some dire dangers for Nephis to overcome. Eventually, though, they made it to the ancient city, and met Effie. Effie was played by a very tall, athletic, and attractive actress. The way she played her, though, was a sight to behold. Basically, the actress went out of her way to portray the Huntress as a charismatic, but not very bright savage who was all brawn and no brain. All she knew how to do was fight, eat, and break things. Sunny turned to Effie and grinned, full of malice and gloating. This was the first time he had ever seen the boisterous young woman. Completely mortified. Casting director, you say? I think I'll send them flowers, too. Chapter 477 Standing ovation. After Nephis reached the Dark City and the Huntress was introduced, both Sunny and Effie watched the rest of the movie with bleak expressions. The second act took place in the outer settlement, and was dedicated to Neff's heroic attempts to protect and inspire the young men and women trapped there. There were a lot of impassioned speeches, blood-chilling expeditions into the Dark City, and tense altercations with Gunlog's forces. There were also a lot of shenanigans from young Sunny, to the delight of the audience. At some point people started to scream, "Are you crazy?" along with him. And a bit later there was a sort of comical moment of growth for the character, when he asked, "Am I crazy?" instead, and went along with Nephis without offering his usual critique, which was met with cheers. Most of this part of the movie, though, was dedicated to the genuine respect and camaraderie that blossomed between Nephis and Castor in this dire time. With the handsome male lead as her right hand, Changing Star successfully united the people of the outer settlement, reminded them what it meant to be humans, and challenged Gunlog to save boisterous Effie from unjust imprisonment. The duel itself was choreographed somewhat well, even if it had nothing to do with the real thing. The moves both the radiant heroine and the cruel tyrant used were flashy and dramatic, and expressed the mood well, but anyone trying to actually fight like that would probably risk having their enemy die of laughter. The third act showed the siege of the Crimson Spire, the heroic stand of the warriors of the First Line and Effie, Kai's battle in the skies with the Spire messengers, and Neff and Castor fighting back to back, slaying dozens and dozens of nightmare creatures together. The audience seemed to have forgotten to breathe, and even Sunny had to admit that the battle scene was filmed especially well, showcasing the chaos, horror, and terrible toll of human lives that such a massacre was bound to reap. Many side characters that people had already grown to love died heroically, and he even heard a few sobs coming from the darkness. Enhanced by the beautiful music, the atmosphere was not tragic, though. On the contrary, it was triumphant and exalted, as if to die in this way was the highest honor a human could receive. A bit uncomfortable, Sunny shifted in his seat. That Griffin guy really knows how to make a tune. When the situation was the most desperate, with the dark water rising and threatening to drown all the surviving warriors, a sudden change happened. The sea suddenly retreated, and the monsters started to fall to the ground. Castor, covered in blood and wounds, looked at Nephi and whispered, "My lady." The sun. Indeed, the sun had suddenly turned menacingly red, its light eradicating the remaining nightmare creatures and assaulting the humans. For the first time in the entire movie, an uncertain and desperate expression appeared on Changing Star's face. Salvation came from someone who the audience would have never expected to see do something so profound. A clear ringing of the bell resounded in the air, and the small figure of clumsy, useless Sonny could be seen near the tower, waving his hand in the air. The survivors rushed toward the crimson spire and entered inside. There. Nephi looked up, and then turned to Sonny. "Someone has to stall the terror so that everyone could escape. I will do battle with that nightmare, but there's an important task you must complete. Lead all these people to the gateway." Sonny on the screen looked at Changing Star with fear. "Lady Nephi, are you crazy? I am just a clumsy kid from the outskirts. How can you entrust something so important to someone like me?" Sonny in the real world suppressed an infuriated groan. People in the audience, though, were rather emotional. "You can do it, Sonny. You got this, kid. You're a great scout, don't sell yourself short." On the screen, the beautiful actress playing Nephi looked down on the comical, slightly pathetic boy in front of her and put her hand on his shoulder. "We, awakened, must rise to the occasion to protect humanity. As long as we don't give up, no matter how dire the situation is, there will be hope. I believe in you, Sonny. You are capable of much more than you think." With that, she left the survivors and went off to fight the terror, while Sonny guided everyone to the gateway. And somewhere in the process, Castor left the group to aid Changing Star in battle. The last scenes of the movie cut between the 100 survivors fighting their way to the gateway and the tragic duo battling the terrifying creature at the top of the spire. Many people in the audience were crying, knowing full well that neither of them was going to return to the real world. In the end, Castor heroically sacrificed himself to protect Nephi, breaking the hearts of so many viewers. The survivors found the gateway and escaped seconds before it was destroyed. The last shot showed bloodied Neph walking out of the tower, holding a broken sword in her hand. As she gazed at the forgotten shore, a lone tear rolled down her cheek. As long as we don't give up, there is hope. The screen turned black, and in the next moment, the audience exploded with applause. Sonny stared at all those people, many of them applauding with tears in their eyes, with a strange expression on his face. Did they actually like that crap? He turned to Effie, lingered for a moment and asked, "Did you like it?" The former huntress gave him a long look, then she said, "What, I am an idiot. Of course I didn't like it. It's such a piece of crap." Sonny exhaled with relief. At least there was one other sane person in this theater. After the movie was over, Kai appeared to deafening applause and gave a short speech, congratulating the director and the crew of the movie and then inviting them on the stage for a short Q&A. Sonny stared at the director of this travesty, seriously considering silently assassinating him for a few moments. Then, he glanced at Effie, who, judging by her face, was thinking the same. He lingered for a few moments, then asked, "What do you want to do?" The young woman inhaled deeply, turned to him, and smiled. "I am hungry. Let's go eat." Together, they snuck out of the screening hall and went to find the theater's restaurant. There were a lot of people there who, just like them, had decided to skip the PR portion of the event, and were now enjoying food and drinks, discussing the movie with lively expressions. Sonny and Effie got themselves something to eat and sat at an empty table, then grew quiet for a while. Each was preoccupied with their own thoughts. Now that Sonny had a little time to digest the movie, his anger subsided a bit. In fact, he was even happy. Sure, the way he was portrayed in the story was as far from the truth as it could have been, and more than a little bit humiliating. But, in a way, this was exactly what he needed. Now that Nephi had become his master, he didn't have to hide his strength and true name that much. But he still preferred to remain in the shadows, not only because there was a possibility of becoming masterless again, but also because it was the best way to be in the world so full of hidden dangers and powerful enemies. Being renowned would make a lot of things difficult for him, and make every battle he fought after that harder. After all, there was no better advantage than being underestimated by the enemy. From that point of view, the ridiculous way in which he was portrayed in the movie was a blessing. It made the possibility of anyone thinking highly of him that much lower. Of course, not everyone was going to watch that travesty, but many would, and their opinion was going to spread. Who would believe that a changing star's bumbling sidekick was, in fact, one of the most dangerous awakened alive, and thus consider him as a serious threat? Pretty much no one. So, in fact, the director of the Song of Light and Darkness unintentionally made him a favor. Satisfied with that conclusion, Sonny looked around. He saw several people looking at Effie with stunned expressions, clearly gathering their courage to come and introduce themselves. But no one had yet. He could hear their whispers, though. "Look! It's her, raised by wolves! Oh my! I heard about her situation, but to actually see. She is so brave!" Effie herself was strangely quiet. She ignored the whispers, then looked at him and asked, "Hey, Sonny. Can I ask you something?" Sensing that this was not going to be a simple question, he tensed a little, and then said, "Sure. What is it?" Effie hesitated for a few moments, then lowered her voice, so that no one would be able to overhear. "Did Castor really leave to help Nephi's?" Sonny stared at his friend for a bit, then shook his head. "No. He left to make sure that she dies." Effie inhaled deeply. "I see." She didn't continue that conversation, as though his answer confirmed something that she had already suspected. Well, despite her often boorish demeanor, and the way she was portrayed in the movie, Effie was anything but stupid. In fact, she was extremely intelligent, cool-headed, and cunning, otherwise she would have never survived for 3 long years alone on the streets of the Dark City. It was only natural for her to have suspicions, considering how much she knew. Luckily, Effie did not ask anything else. Mostly because of a strange man who entered the restaurant, looked around, noticed their table, and walked over with gleaming eyes. Oh no, another fan of Raised by Wolves. The man stopped in front of them, glanced at Effie, and then turned to Sonny with an odd expression. Are you awake and sunless?" Sonny blinked. "What? Yes?" A bright smile appeared on the man's face. "Oh my! Oh goodness! It is such an honor! I am such a huge fan of yours. What is happening?" Sonny stared at the beaming man, trying to comprehend what he was saying. Misjudging his expression, the man hurriedly said, "Oh, sorry! I was so nervous that I forgot to introduce myself. I am a writer. In fact, it was I who wrote the screenplay for A Song of Light and Darkness. And it's all thanks to you." Effie stared at Sonny with an expression that didn't promise him anything good and asked in a sweet voice, "Oh? All thanks to him, really? How come? I'm in trouble." The man's smile grew even wider. "Exploration report on the Forgotten Shore. It is such a brilliant piece of academic work. I base most of my research on your profound work, Awake and Sunless. Everyone on the crew and everyone in the cast read it at least once. I even insisted on giving you the co-writer credit, but sadly it was impossible, you know, due to you not being a member of the Screenwriters Guild. But fret not. I'll let everyone know that if it weren't for you, this movie wouldn't exist." Sonny stared at the man with wide eyes, and then said in a weak voice, "Please don't." But it was of no use. You are so humble. So modest. Well, of course, what else would I expect from a researcher as talented as you? But it wouldn't be right for me to receive all the praise. No, people must know." He looked at the restaurant and proclaimed, not even trying to keep his voice down, "that it is you, Awake and Sunless, who they must thank for being able to enjoy our wonderful film. Sunny looked at the floor. I guess I am going to have to kill Kai. Or wait, no? Actually, that probably makes us even after the whole mongrel disaster. Luckily for Sunny, Kai was finished with his business soon, and they were able to leave the theater for a more private space. Otherwise, there might have been civilian casualties at the premiere of the Song of Light of Darkness. After that damn writer had announced Sunny's identity to everyone in the restaurant, the amount of people asking him to say, "Are you crazy?" to their faces almost pushed him to the brink. In any case, soon he found himself in a sophisticated lounge in the company of Effie, Kai, and Aiko. The petite girl looked very sharp in a fashionable business suit and radiated a sense of cold professionalism that made people think twice before approaching laid-back and friendly Kai, which, Sunny supposed, was a big part of being an idol's manager. When they were seated, the idol in question gave them a guilty look. Well, it wasn't that bad, was it? Effie smiled at him and said sweetly, Sure. But also, the only reason you're still alive is that it would be a chore to clean the blood of my wheelchair. Kai chuckled nervously and glanced at Sunny. What about you? Sunny shrugged. I don't mind. Actually, I am happy to be portrayed as a bumbling fool. The charming archer blinked. Really? Sunny gave him a serious nod. Of course. It's easier to fool people who think that you're the fool. So, I don't mind. Kai looked away in embarrassment. Anyway, you don't have to worry too much, really. These types of films are usually made to boost public morale. No one is really going to take them seriously. Even mundane people understand the difference between reality and fiction when it comes to the awakened. Sunny laughed. Sure. When they want to. He was a mundane person for most of his life too, after all. And even though he grew up in the outskirts, he used to consume cheap entertainment just like everyone else in the waking world. Yes, he knew how to recognize propaganda and what to not take seriously, but at the same time, many things that had nothing to do with the truth found their way into his mind and silently became beliefs. That was how well-engineered falsehoods worked. They spent some time chatting and joking about especially ridiculous moments in the movie, and at the right moment Sunny said, By the way, I talked to Cassie. She's in. But we'll need to do it before winter, so -1 month for preparations. Effie smiled. Good news. I'll start packing then. I am south of Bastion right now, so it will take me 2-3 months to get to the Chained Isles. Unless one of you knows a friendly local saint. Sunny thought about Saint Tyrus, and remained silent. No, that woman frightened him too much to ask for a favor. He wondered how Master Jed had managed to convince her, in the first place. Kai nodded. We can meet in Bastion and travel north together. It will be safer. Aiko, meanwhile, was looking at them with a confused expression on her delicate face. Travel north? Do it before winter? What are you talking about? A guilty expression suddenly appeared on the charming archer's face. I haven't mentioned it before. But basically, I am going to join Sunny, Effie, and Cassie to challenge the second nightmare. Aiko stared at him with a shocked expression. Not to steal from Sunny, but are you crazy? Have you told the agency? Kai smiled weakly. No. I was hoping that you will tell them, actually. They'll listen to you. Isn't it a good thing, really? For public relations. Plus, as a master, I won't have to visit the dream realm every day. The petite girl scoffed. If you survive! Then, she glanced at Sunny and Effie, and shook her head. Who am I kidding? I guess I'll be jobless again soon. You guys have fun for a bit, I'll go get a drink. With that, she rose and went toward the bar. Sunny thought for a bit, then rose, too. I'll go keep her company. Kai gave him a thankful smile. I appreciate it. What does he think I am going to do? Sunny gave his friend a confused look, then followed Aiko. Of course, he wasn't doing it out of consideration. In fact, he wanted to talk to her about something in private. When he approached the bar and stood near the petite girl, she gave him a dirty look. Whatever it is, no. Hell no. Sunny blinked. What do you mean? Aiko smiled crookedly. I know that look of yours. The last time you looked at me like that, Stev, and I almost ended up as the Bloodlord bait. What, do you want me to join your suicide crusade? He shook his head. No. Nothing of the sort. In fact, it's about your job. The petite girl raised an eyebrow. Oh? Sunny nodded. Well, since there's a possibility of you losing a part of your income, and Kai tells me that you are really good at managing stuff, how would you like to help me manage a blossoming new business? Aiko looked at him with a dubious expression. Are you opening an assassination agency? He almost choked. What? What made you think that? No, I just found a way to move items between the real world and the dream realm. My dream, if you need to know, is to become the proprietor of an elite memory store. The petite girl stared at him with wide eyes. Really? Sunny frowned. Yes, really. Why can't I have a dream? Just imagine, sitting safely in a fashionably decorated store without having to risk my skin in the dream realm, and have tons of money simply flow into my hands. That's the stuff dreams are made of, is it not? Aiko shook her head with a bewildered expression on her face. I guess? Sunny smiled. You understand. The others might think that it's silly, but I know you wouldn't, as a former business owner yourself. Anyway, I won't have a large enough arsenal of memories for a while, but I can start creating a reputation for the store already. A brand name, or whatever it's called. So I just sold 4 fallen soul shards on the network, from a devil I killed, and ate. But for some reason, that bastard shards did not fetch a really good price. Aiko looked at him with a frown. Well, what category of the vendor license did you apply for? Who's your appraiser? What's your feature strategy? SEO approach? Pool of endorsements? He remained silent for a bit, then said, You see, you said a lot of words, and most of them even sound familiar, but I have no idea what you mean. What the hell was she talking about? What's a SEO? Are there different licenses? Wait, do I even need a license? Don't tell me that I need to pay taxes too. The petite girl closed her eyes for a moment. None? You did none of these things? Sunny nodded. It's a miracle that you even managed to sell those shards. He smiled. That's why I need someone smart and resourceful like you to help me. 5% commission of every sale. Just think about it. How many Awaken out there can bring soul shards to the real world, and bring spices to the dream realm? We'll be rich in no time. Aiko sighed and remained silent for a bit. Then she said, That is a high-risk business venture that wholly depends on 2 unpredictable factors, you staying alive and you continuously hunting down nightmare creatures, which are usually in contradiction to each other. So in normal circumstances I would have said no. But it is you, I guess. Plus, you have a good relationship with all 3 of the newest named Awakened, as well as a lot of prestige as a member of Changing Stars cohort. And now even some pop culture fame. Aiko shrugged, thought for a long while, and then said categorically, 10%. Sunny grinned and offered her his hand for a handshake. Perfect. Welcome aboard Sunny's brilliant emporium. The petite girl stared at him in shock. Wait, you actually named the store Brilliant Emporium? Can the naming be changed? He shook his head. No. It's non-negotiable. But what's wrong with that name? It's a great name. I think that it's, brilliant. After that night, Sunny became really busy. Delegating, that's the secret of success. That was his thought after Aiko joined the Brilliant Emporium as a manager. With her help, he went through all the necessary paperwork to make his improvised network store seem legit. Sunny noticed the difference right after listing the soul shards he had gathered from the inhabitants of the sanctuary for sale. Not only did they get purchased much faster, but the price was also pleasantly higher than expected. He also didn't need to spend a lot of his severely lacking time on managing sales, delivery, and purchases. Aiko streamlined the process and created a simple and efficient system where he handed her the inventory and the updated information on what items the awakened wanted to receive from him in the dream realm, and she did the rest. While its volume of sales was not overwhelming, the brilliant emporium started functioning as a real business with a constant level of activity and a slowly growing client base. Sunny just had to collect the money and spend it on low-tier memories to feed to Saint. Well, and remain alive while getting the soul shards, of course. Sadly, despite how appreciative of the concept of delegating he became, this was the only part of his busy life that he could entrust to someone else. All the other things he had to do were either too personal or too secretive to recruit anyone to help. No one was going to do his research for him, so Sunny had to spend time writing reports, bringing them to Teacher Julius, and working with the old man to make them worthy of being rewarded with contribution points. Nothing had brought him quite as much as the Forgotten Shore report had, but the points were slowly accumulating. Similarly, now that Cassie was gone on a long expedition, he was the only one of Neff's friends, of which there were only two, really, who could visit her. That was not a burden, but took away some of his time nevertheless. He also kept an eye on the runes describing her status, and saw the number of soul fragments in her possession increase at a frightening speed almost every day. Sunny didn't know where Nephice was and what she was doing, what kinds of enemies she was fighting, but they must have been as powerful as they were ample in numbers. He had to keep up. Now that he had received a vast boost to his power through sacrificing the miraculous coins to the White Altar in the Sanctuary of Noctis, less than 400 fragments stood between him and being able to create a third core. That meant that he had to continue venturing into the wilderness of the Chained Isles to hunt down nightmare creatures. Armed with the cruel sight and the ability to infuse its blade with either invisible soul damage or radiant divine flame, he was now able to go further than he had before, and challenge creatures that previously he chose to avoid. Their deaths rewarded him with shadow fragments, while their bodies gifted him soul shards that were then sold and converted into memories, and through those, into shadow fragments as well, this time for Saint to consume. It was a virtuous, but exhausting and wildly dangerous cycle. And as if the pressure of having to keep up with Changing Star wasn't enough, he also had to continue training, both with the spear, with the help of Effie and his taciturn demon, and without it, to practice shadow dance. That second task, however, had turned out to be much harder than Sunny expected. Before plunging back into the dreamscape, he decided to be careful and check what the situation with Mongrel was. A quick search on the network could tell him if everyone had forgotten about the masked swordsman or not. And as it turned out, they did not. To Sunny's dismay, he found out that in the month of his absence, the people infatuated with Mongrel had not only persisted in their excitement, but also brought it to a whole new, truly ridiculous level. All of them were flooding the network with theories and discussions, and countless individuals, even those who missed out on the initial sensation, were waiting with bated breaths for one glorious moment. The return of Lord Mongrel. With each day that passed, their anticipation only grew stronger. No matter how discreet Sunny could be, once he appeared in the dreamscape, it was going to create too much noise and attract too much attention. Damn it all! What a disaster! He was on verge of pulling his hair out in despair. It was worth remembering that the persona of Mongrel, oh irony, had been created to help him stay anonymous, potentially in order to safely glean secrets about the sovereigns in the future. What a joke it was, that the faceless phantom he created ended up being much more famous and recognizable than its creator. In any case, the situation was seriously messing up Sunny's plans. He simply couldn't use Dreamscape, which caused his progress with Shadow Dance, and the mantle of the underworld, to stall. And if that wasn't enough, there was another unexpected problem he encountered. That one wasn't as inconvenient and pernicious, but made him worry a lot for whatever reason. It was that Sonny had not heard from Mordred again after returning from the ivory tower. Despite the fact that several weeks had passed, the lost prince remained gone. Sonny's head, once again, had only one voice resounding in it, his own. Usually, that would have been a good sign, but Mordred's absence made Sonny tense and full of vaguely bad premonitions. What could have happened to his mysterious helper? Was he simply unable to establish contact outside of the sky below, and the Ivory Island, or had something happened to him? There was no answer. Sonny even took out the mirror shard from the covetous coffer and smeared a few drops of blood on it, to no result whatsoever. The piece of mirror remained the same, absolutely dark and refusing to reflect anything. It was after one of these fruitless attempts that Sonny left Effie to enjoy the dinner he had cooked for them by herself, and went out to sit on the porch in a dark mood. It was early evening, and shadows were slowly growing longer and deeper. Maybe because of his exhaustion, or maybe because of how used he was to being safe in his home, but Sonny got consumed by thoughts and lost track of his surroundings, something that rarely happened. That was why he was so shocked to hear someone's voice just a few meters away. "What are you staring at?" Sonny blinked a few times, then focused his sight on the person who had addressed him. In front of him, at a bit of distance, just between the sidewalk and the path leading to his porch, stood a 14-year-old girl in a school uniform, with black hair and dark eyes, and a very unamused expression on her pale face. Sonny's chest grew cold. Crap! It was Rain. Looking right at Sonny, she sighed and repeated, "I said, what are you staring at, brat?" The novel will be updated first on this website. Come back and continue reading tomorrow, everyone.